Looks like we are live.
Well, good evening, all. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll give it a few more minutes here as we allow people to get settled into their Zoom seats out there. Sometimes with the technology and or the bandwidth connections, it takes a little while, and we still have a few people hopping into the waiting room here. But thank you for joining us tonight for our speaker series. The Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society is proud to present these online programs. We've been doing them for over a year now. This is how we connect in our COVID world, unfortunately. We'd love to be in person, but best we can do at this point. So we're happy to be able to do it. Been able to do almost 30 plus of these since October of last year. So we're going to keep churning them out as people keep coming into the Zoom seats to watching them. As we let some more people in, I'd like to welcome everyone again. If you have any comments or questions during the program, you can put them into the Zoom chat or in Facebook comments, or if it's easier, you can grab your phone, email us at programs@albemarlehistory.org. Any questions you'd like us to address while you're listening to the speaker, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of the program. So we'll hopefully try to answer all of your questions as they come up.
First question, did I unmute myself?
Hello. Yes.
Thank you.
We can hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna try to keep most people muted during the program, but for now, I mean, if you have anything, well, we're just kind of getting through the first part of this. A few announcements. You had an opportunity with our Zoom registration to sign up for an email newsletter. And if you didn't, you can send us an email and ask to join it so you can keep on top of everything we're doing and all the programs that we're putting out. You can email us at info@albemarlehistory.org. Although it is not required, we encourage everyone in attendance to become a member of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. Your support helps us to produce this speaker series and to produce all of our free and online programs that connect you with our local history. You can visit our website to also join or to become a member. Or you can give us a call, 434-296-1492. Mark your calendars for a few upcoming events. November 16th at Northside Library will be our next speaker series. We have Professor Jeff Hantman, who will discuss ancestral Monacan homelands in Charlottesville and Albemarle County. And after the program, we will hold a Civilpedia tutorial immediately after. You can register for this through JMRL, which is co-sponsoring that program with us over at Northside. We're putting all of those into Facebook and the Zoom chat, so you can find that information as we're going through the program. We'll be closed in observance of Thanksgiving, so thank you all, and thanks for everything. On Thursday, November 25th and Friday the 26th will be closed. And before we get this program started, I wanted to put a shout out and thank very much, give special thanks to the Nelson County Historical Society and its president, Debbie Harvey, and the Scottsville Museum and its president, Evelyn Edison, and also the Friends of Esmont and its board of directors chairman, Peggy Purvis Denby, who all were kind enough to partner on this program to make this program possible, spread the word amongst our members to join us tonight for this presentation. The topic of Mr. Barbero's talk, Frank Peregoy, and his life history touched many of the local communities, of which Nelson County was his birthplace. Esmont and the Green Mountain area is where he grew up, and and Charlottesville were local towns that played important roles in his life. So if you could also please take a moment to visit each of these organizations' websites if you're not already familiar with them. There's a wealth of local history and knowledge, and consider supporting your own local historical association. So I realize there's many of you out there that may not be residents of Charlottesville or Albemarle County, but if you are involved with Nelson or the Scottsville Museum or the Friends of Esmont, please consider supporting them. COVID has not been kind to us in many ways, and particularly these small historical societies are kind of struggling and need your support. So enough with those announcements. I welcome Sterling Howell to the Zoom podium. He's our programs and volunteer coordinator, and he will introduce and welcome our speaker.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening, everyone. As Tom said, I'm Sterling Howell, and we'd very much like to welcome you to our speaker series tonight with Paul Barbero, author of A Far Cry from Green Mountain. Paul's love of history and respect for those in the military began at a young age. His father joined the Army following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and spent the next 3.5 years as a navigator in both Europe and Asia. At the war's end, he remained in the reserves, was called back up for the war in Korea, and retired after 35 years as a colonel in the Air Force. Needless to say, a sense of immense patriotism was instilled in Paul at a young age. As a child growing up in Newburgh, New York, he remembers visiting Washington's headquarters, the nation's first national landmark, and being awed at the respect paid by all that entered. The grounds and the monuments surrounding the 400-year-old stone house that Washington called home during the American Revolution added a sense of reverence for history that Paul never lost. As a youth, he attended many cultural, military, and sporting events at nearby West Point. Again, the statuary impressed him as his interest in history increased. His most memorable moment while working at the Point was when he accidentally stumbled across the grave of General George Custer. And another significant moment was when he came across the name Frank Peregoy. Thank you, Paul, very much for joining us this evening. Can you tell us about Frank Peregoy and what inspired you to write this book? The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Sterling. That was a great introduction. I really appreciate it. And before I get started, I would like to thank not only you and Tom for everything that you've done to make this possible, but also the Nelson County Historical Society, the Friends of Esmont, and the Scottsville Museum. I really appreciate everybody coming together to make this happen. It's really greatly appreciated because I feel so strongly about bringing attention to Frank Peregoy and his life and what he achieved and what he accomplished and what he means to all of us. For any of the veterans that happen to be out there, thank you for your service. I think it's great that you're here to join us for this, and I want to thank you. I'd like to do a couple of things tonight, a few things really. And one, I would like to talk to you about how the book came about. As Sterling was just saying, I came across Frank's story in a remarkable way that I think that you will agree it's really something. And I'd also like to tell you a little bit about the life of Frank Peregoy and what influenced him, what life was like for him growing up regionally here during the Depression, and what it was like, how he did it, how he overcame the hardships that he did. And then finally, before I close, I want to talk a little bit about the Normandy Invasion because of how important that was, and that is in fact what he trained for 2 years, and eventually led to his great sacrifice. So just to get started, I had never heard of Frank Peregoy, and my wife and I relocated from north of Charlottesville to the south end of the town, and off Avon Street extended. We moved into Mill Creek, and I and I needed to be able to identify where I had to turn to get home. And so I noticed Peregoy Lane off to the right. That was the turn just before my turn. So that stood out to me. That was something that I needed to memorize so that I, could get myself home. A week after that, I found myself over by the University of Virginia on the intersection of Ivy Road and Emmett Street. And as I was crossing the street, I realized that there was a state historical marker that I had never noticed, and I could only read the top font, and the top font read Staff Sergeant Frank Dabney Peregoy. And so, there's that name again. Who is this guy? And again, someone I had never heard of. So I was pretty busy, and I didn't have the time to cross the street, but I made a mental note that, geez, I've got to find out more about this guy. There's a historical sign up for him. A week after that, I found myself in France, and my wife was born in Paris, and I had promised to take her there for her 60th birthday. And I made that happen. So a week after seeing the state historical sign there, I was in Paris with my wife, and she had asked me, is there anything that you would like to do besides being in Paris while we're in France? We're going to be here for 2 weeks. And I said no. I had been to the Riviera, I had been to the French Alps, and I had been around a little bit, not a lot, but I was really looking forward to Paris. But I did say the one exception, the one thing that I would like to see would be the American beaches in Normandy. And she made that happen. So together we got a car, we went over to Normandy, and we went to the American cemetery. And while we were there, the two of us were admiring a mosaic. It was, if you've ever been there, you can't help but notice how beautiful and serene and just how awesome the place is. Just everything about it. And while we were looking together, while we were looking at that mosaic, I told my wife Edie that I was going to go for a little walk, and I turned around and I went down 10, 15, 20 rows through marble crosses that all look the same. Again, if you've not been there, I'm sure you've probably seen pictures of it. It's really something. But I looked over after going about 20 rows, and I looked down the row, and I saw one that looked a little bit different, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So I walked towards it. And as I got closer, I realized that what made it different was that the lettering on this one was in gold. And when I got up and looked at it, it was the grave of Frank Dabney Peregoy from Virginia. And again, I at this point, it was the first time that I had found out that he was a Medal of Honor recipient, because that too was on his cross. More than anything else, I think it gave me a sense of, wow, I've got to find out. There's got to be some reason that I keep coming across this name. And so I made a mental note that I had to find out more. And a week or two later, we were back in the United States, back in Virginia. And I ran over to that sign so I could read the sign. And when I read the sign and found out what Frank had fearlessly done by single-handedly taking out 2 machine gun nests by himself and killing 8 German soldiers and capturing 35 by himself, I was just so impressed. And I just could not stop wondering how in the world it was possible for one man to have done so much. So that's how I first found out about Frank. And the other thing that I found out was that a couple people that I was talking to about it really didn't know anything about him at all. So my very first stop after that was to the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society, where I met with Margaret. And Margaret was very sweet to me. I told her why I was there. I was looking for information about Frank Peregoy. And did she have any information? She said she did. and she would share it with me. So I asked her, do you mind if I spend an hour or so with the file that you have? And she said, sure, go right ahead. So she sat me down and she turned on a little green glass lamp, and I began to pour through the file. I was there for almost 4 hours. So I went way beyond the hour that I had spoken with Margaret about. And again, the more I read, the more impressed I was, not only with what he had done in Normandy, but what his life had been like leading up to that, and how much how he grew as a man, starting from a young child, and really tried to help answer the question, what does it take to make the kind of person that does the sacrifice required by someone that is awarded the Medal of Honor? So that was the first thing that I did, was I did a bit of research with information that was right out in front there at the Historical Society, and I really appreciate all the effort and all the help that I got over there. When I went home that evening, I saw my wife and I told her about where I had been and what I had done. And I told her, I said, honey, this guy had an incredible life. Someone has got to write a book about this guy. And without blinking, without any kind of fanfare, she just looked at me and said, well, that someone is you. And there was something in her tone of voice that it was a fact. It was not something, she wasn't questioning it. She was telling me, this is what you need to do. You need, and I, never having wanted to write a book, I loved reading. I'd been an avid reader since I was aged 4, as I remember. And I really enjoyed it. I guess that was one thing I had in my favor, because if you're going to put yourself in a position to write a book, you better have done a lot of reading in your life, or else you're just never going to get there. So I couldn't get it out of my mind, honestly. And when you're crossing a river that's an unknown, there's a certain amount of fear involved with it. Nobody wants to start out on something that they're not qualified for. The chances are you're not going to succeed at this. Nobody likes to start off on an adventure where you're going to fail. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought about what Frank had achieved and how much courage he had to do what he had done, that I just, little by little, I made the decision, I have got to do this. I've got to bring his story forward so that it's not lost, so that people understand that there was a guy here in Charlottesville, and this guy gave his life for his country in such a way that he needs to be recognized. And that's basically what I did, how I got started, and that's why I did what I did. And I had to, again, my wife and I had to do some soul searching. This is going to take a lot of time. This is going to take a lot of sacrifice. This is going to take a lot of money to get this thing done. Are we both on the same page with this? And she was so supportive, and she was right there with me from start to finish. And she is one of the people that I've got to thank more than anyone else, probably. And there are a number of them that deserve a lot of thanks to have this book come out when it did. It's been out now for almost 2 years. And of course, COVID has put a stop on getting it out in front of the public as much as I would like to. But anyway, so that's it. I want to go through, as I said, I want to go through some of the things that, were important to Frank in his life. And lucky for you, I have some slides here to keep you interested. So what you're seeing here, and I'm hoping that you can all see, because I've shared my screen here. And so let me get this out of my way. What you're seeing here is a view. There's the picture of Frank is up there. That's a rare picture of Frank, and I got that from the 1940 Stonewall Brigade album, I guess, for lack of a better word, that they put out every 10 years. In 1940, Frank was in the Guard. You can see he was a sergeant at the time, and that's a rare photograph that most people don't get to see. But that is the view still in 2020 is when these pictures that you're about to see were taken by me. And that's the view that still is from the property very close to where the Peregoys lived, up on Old Green Mountain Road. Okay, that's not working. Let me see. I need to be able to, and that's not working. Great. I'm not being able to advance my slides. It's not, I've lost control somehow or other. I apologize.
Can you just click on it, Paul?
Well, there, somehow or other, somehow or other it forwarded. It took some time. And while I'm giving thanks, there's a photograph here of Dr. Richard Heath. Now, Dr. Richard Heath, I met pretty early on when I decided that I wanted to write a book about Frank Peregoy. I attended a program by a local historian, and I met a dentist there that had said some things about Frank Peregoy that I went up to afterwards to question him. And I told him what my goal was. And he said, well, that's interesting because I have a friend, another dentist that's also retiring. And he has a farm up on Old Green Mountain Road. And I'd like for you to meet him. So the three of us had lunch together. And that's when I met Dr. Richard Heath. And what I came to find out having lunch with him is that Dr. Heath was up on Old Green Mountain Road and he purchased the Peregoy property. He owned the property where the Peregoys had lived up on Old Green Mountain Road. And through him, I got access to the property and I was able to find the family cemetery on the property. And with him, I was able to discover a number of things. And as well as he had some information, he was a child, of course, at the time. His father, again, Dr. Richard Heath the first, I guess, owned the original property that was adjacent to the Peregoys. And so I think he's probably the one that ended up purchasing it when the Peregoys left the land back in the 1930s, or probably sometime in the 1940s when he actually acquired the land. I spent the day with him traveling around, and I'm going to show you some of the pictures that we took. Now, this was the Peregoy family was really, what they were dirt poor mountaineers. They were subsistence farmers. They grew what they needed. They had a handful of animals, but they were desperately poor. And during the Depression, everyone was poor, but none so badly as the Peregoys. The good thing, of course, was that it was really nothing new to them. They had been able to live by their wits for so many years, and they continued to do so through the Depression, finding ways to get by and to survive. But you can see from the size of the barn, and that it's not very big. It's what you'd expect to see on a property such as that. One thing about Frank Peregoy, this would have been the plow that he would have attached to the mule. They had a mule to farm the property, and this would have been chained to the mule and would have had to been dragged and run by one person. And that was Frank. And for a number of reasons, it fell to him. His father was distracted with other things. I know that they had a still on the property, he and his brother John, that lived across the street from one another up on Old Green Mountain Road. I know they ran a still. I know they had animals and farming to do, but a lot of times it fell to Frank to run this type of plow, and he did so by himself. Now, he was one of 8 children, so you'd think that there would have been a lot of help from other siblings, but keep in mind, Frank born male. The next 3 born were sisters. So the next brother that would have been out farming the land was a good 6 to 8 years younger than he was, which left him in the position to do the lion's share of the farming. As a result, he was a strong guy. I mean, you could see what it would take to run this kind of a plow and control that for 8 hours a day at times. And he was a really strong guy. He wasn't a huge man by any means. He had immense hands, and thanks to Peggy Danby, I come to find out he had a size 14 shoe, which gives you some idea of the stature of this guy. He wasn't a huge guy, but he had immense hands and immense feet, and he was strong as an ox, which was important for a number of things. One of the things that he did as a young man was he protected his family because they were so poor. They were took the brunt of a lot of negativity, I guess is the best way to put it, from others. And Frank would not let anybody come between him and his sisters and his younger brothers. He protected them from all the bullies and all the people that wanted to try and take advantage of them. He protected his family. He protected his sisters. He protected his neighbors in many ways. And he developed a great sense of patriotism while living up on Old Green Mountain Road. I was able to find out quite a bit about the family through, again, John Peregoy lived across the street, and he also had 8 children. And one of his children was still alive a couple years ago. I met with her. She would have been up on Old Green Mountain Road. She's the only one that I was able to contact that had any firsthand knowledge about the way they lived up on Old Green Mountain Road. And boy, she was very, very helpful. And she also has a niece, Jan Perriello. Some of you may know her. Jan lives in Virginia over by the coast. She developed the family hierarchy. I'm not sure what you would call it. She has a 200-page volume about the Peregoy family that goes back to the 1600s when they came over from France. And their name at the time was Peregoy. So the name has changed more than once. And I've seen it in the literature describing the family during the War of 1812 and being up on Peregoy Ridge outside the city of Baltimore. Baltimore is where they came ashore, and they were indentured there for, I think, 10 years. And that's where the family came first to this country. And it was very early on. Since then, they spread out. And of course, they're in Virginia and whatnot. And in the book, you'll find out how they made it over here to the western part of the state. But anyway, a big shout out to Jan Perriello. I like to hope that she's in on this call somewhere. I took the time to invite her, and I would love to be able to know that she's here. She's so appreciative that this has been done. And like me, she wants nothing more than for people to spread the word that, about her cousin, I guess it was. Now, this was a house that I saw while traveling around with Dr. Heath. And this was a house that he said was almost exactly, the house has since burned down, but this would have been the house that was very much like the house where the 10 Peregoys lived together up on Old Green Mountain Road. It's basically the size of the garage at my house, but I can't believe that 10 people lived in there, but there it is. Old Green Mountain Road today, this, as you can see from the date, it's only a year and a half ago, but it's still a dirt road, and the vistas are still just as beautiful as they were back in Frank's day. This would have been Frank's old schoolhouse, the Old Dominion School that's over that way, and their church, the Sharon Baptist Church. Now, keep in mind that the entire family had to come down off of Old Green Mountain Road to attend church, to attend school. So again, they did this while attending their chores on their farm. This was not a lazy family. This family worked hard. Now, Uncle John worked at a garage, and he was an incredibly diverse guy. He could break things down, fix them, and he would work on trucks and cars, and he taught the kids up on Old Green Mountain how to be resourceful. And these guys had some hillbilly knowledge to them that suited them, and it helped them, and it helped Frank while he was in the army to do certain things that he needed to get done. So I saw this garage and I thought to myself, oh my God, that must be just like the old garage that Frank's uncle must have. I knew he worked at Pace's garage and I couldn't tell, but I looked at this and decided to take a picture, and I moved around to the side. And if you look up at the peak there, you can see pretty clearly Pace's garage is painted up on the top. So I had in fact found it. So this little tiny building was where Uncle John had worked and taught Frank a lot about being able to get things done in a mechanical way, or just doing without, but making sure they'd found ways to get things done. This would have been the old gas, tank, or the pump rather, I'm sorry, that was on the property, of the garage. And this is the Rockfish River, important because Frank, they would rely on fish as part of their diet, and the rockfish is located very close to Schuyler, Virginia. It's close to Esmont. It's close to Faber. This is where the family lived, and this is where, in the book, you'll see that there were the Waltons, the Hamners rather, lived very close to this area. And there's a point in the book where Frank and his young brothers, he was teaching them to fish, where they met the Hamner family. Of course, Frank had met them earlier on because he was older. But Earl Hamner, as most of you will remember, was the author of The Waltons, which was ran on television for quite a number of years. And he was quite a famous writer, and well beyond that. And he fished all over the world, but he always said that fishing the rockfish back in Esmont in Virginia was one of his favorite things to do. In the book, I tried to bring in any families or any notoriety, if you will, that Frank would have come through across in his life. There's mention of the Astors, and more than one had crossed his path in this part of Virginia. The Roosevelts, both Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Teddy Roosevelt, had a presence here in this part of Virginia. And of course, you can't write anything or talk anything about the area without going through Thomas Jefferson and Lafayette and Lewis and Clark. So they're all mentioned in the book. Frank would have known about all these people, and they had an influence on him in his book. So this is the Hamners, the Hamner house. And most of you that know the area know that a lot of people made their living in the quarries, in the soapstone quarries here. So that was how most of the people there made their living. And I told you that I had been to the cemetery for the Peregoy family, and you can see here the stones. And I don't know if you can see both of them. One of mine is cut off, but they have the birth and the death dates, which fit exactly with the dates that I had, thanks to Jan Perriello. The interesting thing here is I took these pictures in 2020. The first time I was on this property was back in 2017, 2016, and these stones were not there. What was there was some plain brown sandstone markers, a large one for each parent and smaller ones for 3 of the children that had passed away while the family was up on the Old Green Mountain Road. So I just thought it interesting that I did in fact make it to ground zero here for the Peregoy family. Many of you may know of Chubby Prophet. Chubby was roommates with Frank Peregoy in France. They were both part of the Monticello Guard, and they went to to England, I'm sorry, and to train for the Normandy Invasion. They were there together, I believe, for 20 months. And Chubby himself is a real hero. He also earned and was awarded the French equivalent of the Medal of Honor. And there was a time that on the same time that Frank single-handedly took out two German machine gun nests, that Chubby also ran out through enemy fire and commandeered an American tank that had been, well, it was rendered useless, at least by they couldn't move because of the track being blown off it. But Frank or Chubby correctly surmised that the turret probably would still work. He ran through enemy fire, and he and the gunner of the tank were able to identify where the enemy fire was coming through from and take out enemy positions, which to me would have been every bit as valuable as what Frank did, really. You know, he risked his life to get on that tank. So anyway, this was Chubby Prophet. I got to know him quite well. I had lunches with Chubby for a better than a year, maybe a year and a half. And I met him on my very first day, taking my very first step forward to write the book. I stopped at the Monticello Guard, told them what I was planning to do. And they looked at me and said, well, you want to write a book about Frank? Have you spoken with Chubby Prophet? And who's Chubby Prophet? And they go, well, you need to know Chubby, because Chubby and Frank were friends, and they were roommates over in England. And I said, well, that's great. How would I find him? He goes, well, he lives locally. I have his phone number. I called Chubby Prophet, and I met him an hour later. He was anxious to speak with me. So anyway, it was just an amazing time that I had. He was just such a personality, and he gave so freely of his time to me. And I was able to learn so much about what their life was like and about Normandy from spending that amount of time with Chubby. Okay, technological problems here, not working. Okay, not sure why not. Bear with me here. It's not advancing. Okay. So anyway, I guess I'm just stuck here with a, well, here it is. For some reason, it just blocks up for a minute. There's only, I thought this was an interesting thing that Chubby said about there's only one, once they got onto the beaches, there was only one way they were going to make it home. They had to go over that beach and through enemies all the way to Germany. And that's what he did. Chubby was wounded 3 times and went back to the battle each and every time. Fortunately for him, he survived the war, came home, and had the life that Frank Peregoy never did have. But he was so appreciated by the men of the Monticello Guard. And to this day, the respect for him is just incredible. What Chubby once told me was, I wouldn't take $1 million for the experience, and I wouldn't take $1 million to do it again. I thought that was really, really something. The Kentucky Peninsula, and again, just to close up with the Normandy invasion, what I wanted to spend some time dealing with what worked really, really well and what didn't work so well. The way that the spy operation with the United States and Great Britain fooled the Germans into believing that the real invasion was going to occur somewhere else and not at Normandy, kept the Germans from reinforcing the area where the invasion was long enough for the Allies to land hundreds of thousands of troops. By the time the Germans realized that that was the invasion, it was too late. There was nothing that they could do to stop it, and they knew that it was the beginning of the end. So that's one of the things that worked really well, was the fact that they're planning the way they disrupted the infrastructure inland, so that Germany, even if they wanted to, would have had such a hard time reinforcing what they had in Normandy, taking out all kinds of communication lines, transportation lines, all supply lines. It was really, really well thought through. Some of the things that were not so well thought through. If you take a look at these men exiting the Higgins boats and making for land, you can see that they have a great deal of weight on them. Why these soldiers had to go ashore with 80 pounds on their backs is something I'll never quite understand. It certainly did not do a lot to help them. And we've all seen pictures. Omaha Beach, where both Frank and Chubby landed, was not great. Of course, they were not as badly. They were not in the first wave. They were in the second wave. And by then, they were able to make it across the beach to the cliffs and up the cliffs. And they were able to do so, both Frank and Chubby, without losing a man in their command. So that was really something. Something else that didn't work out well was hedgerow fighting. It didn't seem like the Allies were prepared. If you look at this slide, and if you look on the left, the hedgerows were built all the way back in the time of the Romans. And you had 4 to 8 feet of stone on which they planted trees, and the tree roots would go through, and they would tie that whole thing together so that it was immovable. Why we were so unprepared to do battle through that kind of hedgerow territory, I'm not quite sure why. The French resistance, we were in touch with them, and there were plenty of people. Patton was in Normandy during his honeymoon. He would have known. De Gaulle was living in London. De Gaulle would have known. It just seems like it was a big mistake not to have some kind of idea how they were going to do it, because this is an aerial view of hedgerow country. It was 1 acre at a time through miles and miles of the French land that they had to go through, and that took the lives of so many of the 29th Division. So, I mean, eventually they did figure it out. They figured out a way to weld prongs onto tanks so that the tank, and where to properly place them on the tank, to literally run right through the log. It lifted the trees up and over the tank, and the tank could go all the way through without making a second hit. The way they had initially designed it, it would have to hit the wall twice. That by re-maneuvering the prongs, they were able to do it in one quick thing. In that way, the Germans weren't alerted to the fact that that's where they were breaking through the hedgerow line. Again, I thought that was one of the big mistakes, and there's a lot about it in the book. I only have a few more things to mention before I open this up for questions. You know, Frank was awarded, had earned the Soldier's Medal and the Medal of Honor. The Soldier's Medal is the second highest award for valor in the country. And you get this from, again, bravery above and beyond. And in the book, you'll see how he went about saving someone's life and being awarded. I think he was the first medal given to the entire 29th Division. The war was only 2 months old. And I don't think too many soldiers had even left the country by then. But he earned the Soldier's Medal for bravery in saving a life of one of his fellow soldiers. There have not been a lot of soldiers' medals earned over the years in this country, but there is one person that we all know and that we all saw put to rest very recently. Colin Powell was another recipient of the Soldier's Medal, and he was awarded it for going back and forth to his burning helicopter and dragging every man under his command out to safety before the helicopter blew up. And they mentioned, you know, the whole time that we went through and listened to all the talking heads talking about Colin Powell over the past couple of weeks, I never heard anyone mention that he had been awarded the Soldier's Medal. That really distinguishes him as a hero to me. I mean, because he risked his life and saved his men, not taking away from the other accomplishments that he did in the course of his life. And of course, the Medal of Honor. Frank was awarded the Medal of Honor. He never got it. It was given to his wife, because he passed away. He lost his life, I should say, 6 days later on D-Day +8, trying to take another village. But it's, was awarded to his wife. And again, that is the highest award given in our country. So at this point, I'm just about finished with things that I have to say. Let me see, my teleprompter's trying to prompt me with something. And I think I've already hit upon it, but again, Frank was a hero because he put his fear behind him, and he took his courage, and in order to protect his men so they weren't decimated on on the hill, taking the town, that he did what he had to do single-handedly, and was able to take out the the most important machine gun nests, and give the rest of his men the courage to join him. And not long after that, the village was finally taken. It's all in the book. Anyway, you can see it. It's all in the book. And at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions. Anyone?
Thank you very much, Frank. Sorry, no, not Frank, Paul.
Frank's not here.
I think you brought him back to life for us.
That's my goal. So
with your book and your story, and I can't say I've read the whole book, but I've definitely opened it up and read I'd say about half of it. And the way you write, the way you kind of fill in the character and show us kind of the man he was, I find that great.
Well, it's nice to hear. Thank you.
I'm curious in terms of your work and your writing, the research, what kind of stood out to you the most with your research into his life? What just kind of amazed you? You talked a little bit about kind of the early life, living through the Depression, being the oldest of many kids, but anything else really kind of stood out as you understand him?
It's a great question. What stood out the most about Frank? And I think that it was twofold. I think it's how hard he worked and how important it was for him to protect his family. And at the same time, he had to overcome some personal things, like a feeling of just not being accepted and not having the self-confidence necessary to do things that he thought he needed to do. I think that was something that I saw continually. And I also thought that in my reading and finding what others thought about Frank, Chubby Prophet said it to me best. And when I asked him about Frank, in the early days, he said, Frank was a good guy. It doesn't sound like a lot. So you'd have to know Chubby, and you'd have to know how much that meant coming from him to understand how important it was. And what I found was that others felt the same way about him. There was no reason that he should have feel that lack of confidence and that feeling of not being accepted, because in fact he was. Yeah, everybody, and I heard this from Chubby, everybody thought the world of Frank. He was not at all. He was immensely strong. There's a lot of things in the book that, if you want to read the book, that you're going to see, and these are true stories, that he was a strong guy, but he was certainly no bully, and he didn't look for fights. He stayed away from fights as much as he could. So these are things that I found that were pretty amazing.
Well, it was usually, from what I understood, and I have, if anyone's looking at my little video, my grandfather looking over my shoulder here, World War II vet, fought in Italy, Salerno in September of 43 and fought through February of 44, the front line time, and got pulled out of a ditch, not thinking that he would make it. And that at the age of, by the time 21, 22, had lived that type of life, had so many other experiences after that somebody like Chubby and my grandfather would have gotten along fabulously.
Yeah, it's a great thing that they survived to come on. My father-in-law fought in Italy too, pushed the Germans up past and through the Alps.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it was,
Mr. Barbero,
yes,
I wanted to ask a question that I put in the chat about Mr. Prophet.
okay,
But I also have kind of what I think is an interesting story. Frank is my great uncle.
okay,
His brother Henry was my granddad.
okay,
And Henry was one of the youngest brothers.
right,
And
right,
he's also a World War II vet
okay,
who's since passed away. But
Mhm.
I happened to have a chance meeting with Mr. Prophet. He turned out to be my neighbor. And
wow.
I knocked
Charlottesville?
on his door one day to ask him to sign a petition for the neighborhood for a traffic study. And he invited me in, and I saw on his wall a
Yeah.
picture of him saluting Frank Peregoy's placard, I guess when it was dedicated.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I said to him, "Did you know Frank?" And he said, "Yes, we were bunkmates," is what he told me.
hmm,
And I was just like stunned that I was meeting someone who had known my uncle who I had heard about growing
Right.
up.
I can
And
imagine, yeah, I can imagine, it's,
and he was
and
wonderful.
I don't know when you met him. By the time I was able to meet Chubby, I firmly believe that he was the last one. He was the last one from the Monticello Guard that was still alive. And it was Providence that led me to him, because he was so giving of information and he knew so much, offered so much, and gave of it so freely. I can imagine what it must have been like for you, because Frank was a relative for you. That's a great story.
And it was when he was living on Chesapeake Street
Mm-hmm.
and on the corner, right near the stop sign. And I think it was the home he'd shared with his wife for many years.
Oh yeah.
And it was still very decorated, as if his wife were still there.
Yeah.
But he invited me in to sit with him, and we spoke, but he was the first door I knocked on, and I had about 30 that I needed to knock on. And
That one
but
took
it
you a
was-
while, I'm sure.
yeah, it was just a lovely experience
Oh, yeah.
talking to him and meeting him and being able to thank him for his service, because I know
Yeah.
he was a very modest,
He was.
down to earth guy.
Yeah.
And one other thing I might mention is that growing up with my granddad, Henry, we were always amazed at how large his hands were. So the comment you made about Frank's hands being so large.
So it
I
was you're saying it was a family thing, Henry.
Well, Henry worked at Frank's textile mill, and I'm sure he, worked his hands very hard. But he wasn't at Green Mountain very long.
Right. Yeah, he could not have been.
Because when the parents were both gone, he went to live with a sister, I
Right.
believe Elsie,
Right.
but and who signed for my granddad to join the military at a very young age.
Mhm.
And my understanding about Frank's sign up and the reason his name was wrong is because that he potentially was not being truthful about his age so that he could enter the service.
That's the way I wrote it.
Yep, that's how I've heard it over the
Yeah,
years as well.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not true, it's well told. It's just
Well, and it
we'll
makes
never.
sense.
I don't think we'll ever know, but it certainly would go along perfectly, because he was only 15 years old when he joined up. So he lied about his birth date. So the next thing would have been, the other thing that I guess it would be a relative of yours, Jan Perriello, who I mentioned. She let me know that the name that Susie, the mother, had, when the younger children were born, they went under Peregoy. Some of them were on their birth certificates. It says Peregoy. So she found that out later in the game. I think the book was already out by then. I'm not sure, but
Well, I had
Anyway.
heard that too, that
Okay.
maybe the people filling out the forms weren't very literate,
yeah.
and maybe
who
did
knows?
sort of an approximation of the spelling of the name.
Right.
And but I was told that they were all born on the farm and had a midwife there, except for maybe the younger one or two went to a hospital.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
heard that too. I heard that the younger ones would have been up in UVA, but I mean, I don't know. So
Well, thank you for looking into this and writing about this. And it's been really cool to learn about the early life. So thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you. I love getting fresh information. So thank you very much.
So I have a question, Mr. Barbero.
Yes, Mr. Heil.
How are you, sir?
I'm fine.
G-
Thank you.
Great, good. Hey, I'm really enjoying the book, and crossing the Atlantic seemed pretty precarious with all the German U-boats. And I was amazed to hear about that accident where the ship split another boat in half.
Yeah.
Was that a common occurrence? And do you have any more background on that? That's number
No,
one.
well, of course, it was pretty early on. The dates escaping me, but I don't think that they were on the QE2. It had been outfitted to transport troops from New York. There were the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth. One ran out of New York City. One ran out of Australia. The one that ran out of New York City, of course, would have had to cross the Atlantic to fight the war, to prepare for the war in Europe. It was early on. I think that it was a horrific accident. I think it was an outlier. I don't think there were any others. There's certainly no others that I had heard like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, got it.
Everything
Great.
just it had to be the perfect storm where both captains made errors, and that's the way it was decided in the courts years later, was that there were both captains were guilty of making errors, and it was just one of those horrible things. Hundreds of British seamen died.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, amazing.
very true, very sad. So
Hey, final question. So great job on the book. And is there any other books in the works that we can look forward to?
yeah, good question. Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. And the next book is already underway, but it has been for some time. It's not going really fast. The next book would be about my father's family and my father's service during the Second World War. He had a very dangerous service. He crisscrossed the Himalaya mountains, transporting fuel, machinery, food to the Chinese, in the effort to keep the Japanese from conquering China and taking all of their troops and putting them against the Allies elsewhere. It was FDR's decision to start an airlift, which was the only way to provide provisions in China. So my father and the guys that flew they flew the hump were living in India and flying over Burma to get over the jungles in Burma across what they called the Aluminum Trail. And the Aluminum Trail was named that because so many planes went down. It's the worst weather on Earth, the weather over the Himalaya mountains. And they lost an unbelievable number of men and planes. And it was all of the men that flew the hump are in the Distinguished Service Cross, just to give you an idea of how difficult and how dangerous it was considered. Anyway, that's the next book. I wouldn't hold my breath. It's taking me a little bit longer. Well,
Thank you.
a far cry from Green Mountain took me 6 years. So I'd say 6 years is probably what it's going to take for Johnny Apples and the Aluminum Trail.
Well, thank you, Mr. Howe, for the question. Much appreciated. And thank you for the 6 years you worked on that book, sir. We appreciate it. A quick question from early on. Was that a single room schoolhouse? You showed a picture of it.
It was. Yeah, it was.
I would assume. And Yeah, Miss Thompson, who we heard from, her brother was Henry, or his brother, Frank's brother was Henry, and that was her grandfather, and mentioned that. And then also, what was Mr. Prophet with Frank when he died in battle?
He did. He was. They were on opposite sides of a hedgerow. Frank and his men were the first ones through, and Frank was killed almost immediately. And Chubby went through the hedgerow to drag Frank's body back. So that I had spoken at length with him about that. So yeah, they were together.
Hmm. And where can we get the book?
Well, let me see. Well, you can certainly you can go to Amazon. You can go into Charlottesville. The New Dominion bookstore has it, as does Barnes and Noble. And if they don't have it and you're there looking for the book, ask them why they don't have it, if you will. I had my email address on the PowerPoint, but I seem to have lost it again.
Yeah, we can share that.
Oh, there it is. All right, so anybody that wants the book can reach me at pjbarbero@gmail.com. Nice and easy.
Okay. There was another question here from David Samples. Why is the historical marker specifically at the corner of Emmett and Ivy?
Ugh, God, it's a great question. I can't answer it. I've spoken with a number of people. No one, including myself, is happy about where it's located. It's just a terrible intersection, and it's ignored. It doesn't stand out. I know that Peggy wants to have something down in Esmont. She's asked me about it. My wife and I are prepared and willing to stand by her to help that happen. There needs to be a sign there, but why they chose that intersection of all places in Charlottesville, I will never know. As far as I'm concerned, they should have a statue of Frank somewhere in town, and they probably should never take it down, but who knows? Anyway.
Wasn't there some story about him in a lumber yard or?
Wait, that's where he worked. He worked at a lumber yard that would have been right below the Belmont Bridge, the beautiful bridge that they've been working on for the whole 15 years that I've been in Virginia here. They're working on the Belmont Bridge. But at the time, there was a lumber yard down there, Barnes Lumber Company. And Frank worked there. He was lucky enough after his father passed, Frank tried to keep the family together up on Green Mountain, but it didn't last very long. He was only 19 years old himself, and some of the kids were pretty young, and so they were all shipped out. But Frank, anyway, ended up in Charlottesville. I think initially he stayed with some family until he was able to make it out on his own, and he worked at the lumber yard. Some very interesting stories. I hit it in the book, some of the things that happened to him during that time. Some of the things he experienced, and made for good copy, I think. So.
I enjoyed some of those stories.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any more questions popping up, and we're getting a little bit into the hour period here with this program. We usually like to wrap them up within an hour or so. And if you do have any questions, if you're sitting there thinking and you don't know how to formulate it, you can easily email us with all the different emails that have bounced around here in the chat, or contact us if you need any more information. I know New Dominion Bookshop downtown. I'm going to run by there tomorrow and see if they have your book in the window at least. And we might even grab a few here now that we're open to the public and put them out so that people can purchase them. But I appreciate you joining us. And I also wanted to put out there very briefly that we had hoped that Miss Denby, Peggy Denby, would have joined us tonight, but I understand that Don, her husband, ended up in the hospital with some very serious conditions. So just keep her and her family in your thoughts, because it seemed like it wasn't very good. So just wanted to put it out there for everyone to think about that. And thank you for joining us tonight. Remember, everything we do as your historical society is because of your support. Please join us as a member if you want to, and we'd love to have you. And your support helps do these types of programs and bring personalities like Paul into your living room or your kitchen or your bedroom through this Zoom world. And I know there's a number of folks who are related. I saw Ms. Perriello had registered, so we'll have this recorded too. So we're going to be sharing this so people can watch it either on Facebook or on our YouTube channel.
No, that's great.
So our speaker series is brought to you by Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society and wonderful supporters like you. And we also want to thank Paul again. Thank you for joining us. Debbie Harvey with Nelson Historical Society, Evelyn Edson with Scottsville Museum, and Peggy Denby, as I said, with Friends of Esmont. But keep her in your thoughts tonight. So thank you for Zooming with us, and hope to see you. I'm Tom Chapman, and this is Sterling Howe here helping me man the Zoom world. And we hope to see you for our next speaker series. And until then, stay safe and support local history. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
Paul. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.